Welcome to the Martina Tierney Podcast. I want to ask you a favour. If you like what you hear, would you like, share and subscribe, because that helps us to get the message out and for people to hear the wisdom of all our guests. Caroline, one thing I heard you talking about recently on a podcast was about focusing on your strengths and not on your weaknesses. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I always say only develop a weakness if you really must develop it. So if it's a task that you cannot delegate or hire somebody to support you with, but ultimately you will do so much better if you're working in a role that aligns to your strengths.
I'm sitting here today with Caroline. Caroline is an accredited executive coach. That's hard to say that all in one sentence. I've had many conversations with Caroline across the kitchen table. Today it's going to be a little bit more formal, but not too formal, I hope. Very welcome, Caroline.
Thank you very much. I'm absolutely honoured to be here. It's great to be given this opportunity.
Caroline, I've wanted to have you on the podcast for some time now, but you've recently written your first book and I want to chat to you about that. But before I get there, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am an executive coach, speaker and now an author, and I work with business leaders who are growing or scaling their business. And the work I do, Martina, is very much around when you're growing. So whenever you set ambitious goals, there will be challenges, whether that's professional or personal. So I support people through that. So the business leaders I work with, it's really navigating the growth so that they can move forward, either enjoy the process. There tends to be similar challenges that I would say. They're either struggling to prioritise self-care, which is a big one because they tend to be working a lot of hours, and there might also be strained relationships off the back of that as well. So there's problems that come up whenever you are working too many hours. If you're not supporting yourself or investing right in your time and attention where it needs to go. Some of the leaders might be doubting their leadership ability to grow or scale their business, and it's supporting them through that. And then a big common one is really helping people to take the focus out of the day-to-day so that they can work on the activities that will really move the needle for the business. So they will be working on things such as, some of them, it's very hard when you grow a business or build a business, it's your baby, to then let go and empower the team around you. But ultimately it is about unlocking potential. I like to say the work that I do really helps people just to be happier through this journey of trying to achieve their own goals.
Even though we're talking about business owners here and entrepreneurs, these principles apply to anyone, because even people working in healthcare are in very demanding roles, because leadership is really about prioritising. It's about looking after yourself while achieving your goals. Caroline, one thing I heard you talking about recently on a podcast was about focusing on your strengths and not on your weaknesses. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So whenever you think about how do you unlock your potential, one of the greatest things that you can do is really know your strengths and then align the work that you do to your strengths, because that is where you will naturally excel. Often friction is created if we're in a role that's not calling to our strengths. So some high achievers particularly can focus on the weaknesses and, I need to get better at this weakness. I always say only develop a weakness if you really must develop it. So if it's a task that you cannot delegate or hire somebody to support you with, but ultimately you will do so much better if you're working in a role that aligns to your strengths. I've seen it in my own path, Martina, because I very much had identified, I knew that I was good with people, and communication is where I really had my own strengths. And then once I started into coaching, it's like things just started to flow better. It doesn't mean that challenges go away, because we all have challenges, there's no doubt, but you are removing friction and you're setting yourself up really to create a better flow. And especially the other thing I would align to that is purpose. If you're working to a very clear purpose and you align that to your strengths, that's where I believe the magic really happens.
Some people have a difficulty identifying their strengths and their weaknesses. How do you help them to overcome that?
One of the things I would really recommend is what I call it's called a 360. Now, if you don't work in a team, don't worry. It's just ask the people around you, the people who you interact with, get their feedback. And now that might take courage for some people. So, you can keep this as simple as you like. Just say, I'd like to improve it, because coaching is all about improvement, and it's asking somebody, where do you think, what should I start, stop and continue to do? I love those simple questions.
What should I?
Start, stop, and continue to do. They're very simple, but they'll identify some of your strengths. They'll also highlight the blind spots as well, because it's also important that we're aware of them. Because for some people, it might be the blind spots is the area that needs to be developed, and that's more around behaviours.
I read this book one time, and it was called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And I think that's incredibly important, that how we talk to ourselves is important. Would you agree with that, Caroline?
I do, honestly. I think it's my key message is if we take control of our thinking, it can actually be life-changing. And this applies to anybody. Martina, just back to your point earlier, I know I introduced it as, yes, I work with business leaders, but the methods that I am using in coaching psychology as well, it's very much around things that every person can apply. And the thinking is the first place to stop. It's actually in my book, 7 Inspired Steps to Unlock Next Level Growth. It's step one, is self-stories. And I encourage everyone to take control of their self-stories. And these are the inner narratives that don't serve you. So it might be thoughts like, I'm not good enough. I'm not capable for that promotion. I'm not smart enough for that promotion, or I'm not smart enough to start my own business. It's whatever it is for you. I'm not capable of going back to work. It's whatever it is really for the individual. But we tend to all have non-value added thinking, because again, the survival brain tries to protect you. If you're thinking about achieving an ambitious goal, it will naturally want to pull you back to safety. So anytime we set this, say just a goal that you haven't been before, the survival brain will pick that up as, oh no, that's new. So let's naturally bring you back, and it will do it. One of the ways will be the inner narrative surfacing.
Caroline, how would you overcome that? What advice do you give?
So you sweep it out. I talk in the book about 3S in your thinking. Now, I know this isn't a lean podcast, but one of the common terms, Ryan has it in his book, is called 3S'ing. I encourage the reader and the listener to do that with your thinking. It's one of the most simplest things, not easy to do in the sense it takes effort, but it's a very simple concept of 3S in your thinking. Sort, sweep, standardise. And sorting means you sort out the thoughts that are not serving you. What is the negative thought patterns? What's the non-value added thinking that is holding you back from your own next level of growth? Now, next level of growth might be, it's not necessarily meaning that you want to be aiming higher, because it's whatever it is for you. You might want to be pulling back. So your next level of growth might be that you're somebody that actually starts to pull back a bit, goes down to part-time, or should be retiring. Yes, absolutely. But when you challenge and get clear, what are the thoughts that aren't serving me, that's really stopping me? How am I being the bottleneck right now in terms of my thinking? Then sort it out. And that is, take the thought and go to the polar opposite, adopt an empowering belief. So I'm not good enough becomes I am good enough and willing to learn. I'm not capable, I am capable. It's just changing it to a real empowering belief. Now, I want to emphasize something really important here, Martina, so that I don't lose people. This is not about false positivity. This is not about saying, oh, I don't think I'm smart enough, and then saying, oh, I am smart enough, and maybe there's a gap. What I have found, and I would be sure that every listener this applies to, especially if the listener is based in Northern Ireland, where we have a cultural belief that self-praise is no praise. Most people's inner narrative that is negative, their actual reality is up here. So for the listener, I'm actually showing it's like up high, but down beneath is where their identity sits. And the affirmation is bridging that. So if you think you're not smart enough, but actually you've loads of evidence up here at the higher level that you are smart enough, it already exists. The affirmation is bridging that. It's really important that you have emotion to it. So you have to go into this process knowing that it's a process, and that you will, by the end of the process, believe it. What I really was emphasising there is that it's not false positivity, because take somebody who thinks they're not smart enough to, say, start their business, but they may have been the top performer in the business they work in, so they absolutely are smart enough to start their business. So the evidence is there. It's just that the negative narrative is how they're holding themselves back. So that's really what's happening here. It's like, bridge that gap, start becoming your fan and recognizing that you are capable, that you do have talents, but we're very, very fond of putting ourselves down. So I see this as a toolkit that anybody can apply, even in parenting. You know, how many times are we beating ourselves up? I'm not a good enough mother. I'm not a good enough father. I'm not doing a good enough job. It's like, catch that. So catch it and go to the, no, I'm doing the best that I can. Because at the end of the day, the majority of us are, you know, we are doing the best that we can. There might be a better way, but we just don't know it, or we're not aware of it. We're doing the best that we can. So it's making sure that your thoughts serve you, because it doesn't serve you to have that negative thinking. You only start to spiral then.
You mentioned parenting there, and I did read in your book that your daughter said something to you one time that changed the way you do things. Tell us a little bit about that.
I say behind every creative project, which is the book, there's always suffering of some sort. So for me, and this is why I'm so passionate about taking control of your thinking, because I felt the consequences of it, and also recognizing what it's like whenever you do step out of your comfort zone. So my daughter Kira turned to me one day, and she was about 7, so we're going back about 8 years ago, and she said, "Mum, you'd rather work than spend time with me." Now, ouch, I felt that. It just was like a dagger to the heart, because Martina, I felt everything I was doing for my family. So to hear that from her, it really hurt, it stung, and it was a wake up call, because I knew in that moment that, okay, I have to change my way of working. Now, what I was doing, and the reason she said that, was I was doing a lot of hours. So I was doing a lot of overtime. Here's where I started to dig deep. And I recognised that my imposter, so this imposter being the negative inner narrative, thinking to you're not good enough. I had moved jobs. I was in a job for 13 and a half years, and I decided to move jobs, and it was the right decision for me, and I knew I wanted to do it. But once I got into this new team, they were a very high performing team. I loved the business. Insecurity started to surface. I didn't even know I had. So I started to think, I'm not smart enough to actually work here. And it showed up then as overworking. So my strategy was just, let's overwork, let's just keep the head down, keep working, to do a better job, and that's when I realised, I went, this isn't working. Now, I wanted to keep my ambition. I didn't want to suddenly, the answer wasn't, oh, just go get a part-time job. I wanted to keep my ambition. So what I then did was I held the mirror up, and I looked close at my habits, my behaviours, and the thinking that wasn't serve me, and I started to lead myself better. And that is where the Lead Self First, the book, came from. I then went on my own journey of transformation, and it was about looking within, because it's very easy for us to blame other people. Blame the company we work for, blame our partner, blame our situation. But I knew the change had to start with me. So my book is a self-leadership book. It's about holding up that mirror and looking at what you do control. And then when I started into my practice and started coaching business leaders who were also out of their comfort zone, I started to see trends. I started to see certain pain points that we struggle with whenever we are trying to be the best version of ourselves, trying to do the best that we can. So I brought it into 7 steps. So the steps are applicable to anybody. Absolutely applicable to anybody. The book is just simply written to the business leader, because that's who I work with, but it's applicable to anybody, and that's what I'm most excited about. Is my hope is that anyone who's feeling stuck or listening right now and thinking that they want more, or they want to try and, if they're feeling a wee bit helpless around changing their situation, is going, read the book.
I can relate to that, because I remember one time I was in a business. It was way before Disability Centre or Seating Matters, and it was a very high pressured business, and they recommended that we read a tape, that we listened to tape every week, that we read a book, that we attended seminars, and it was really high pressure. And I really even couldn't sit and watch my favourite TV programme. I couldn't read a magazine, because I felt that everything I was doing had to be reaching my goals. And I put myself under severe stress doing that. And you've sort of mentioned something like that in the book. So obviously I'm not the only person that felt like that.
No, and Martina, you weren't, because I thought like that. So I had realised when I did start to do my own transformation, I started, like self-development can become addictive. And I started to feel that every book I read had to in some way be supporting my growth. Every podcast, like I stopped listening to music, because I was like you, I felt, no, I need to be listening to something here productive. So I would go for a walk out of the AirPods in. But I very quickly learned that leads to burnout. It just leads to burnout. It's not, it's addictive. So what I then did was I started to put in non-negotiables as certain things to support me, to help me then to switch off. And an example of that is a Sunday is my non-negotiable. I will not do anything personal development related on a Sunday.
But now I've realised that I need to take down time, and it's something that I try to encourage with my sons and my daughter, because their father would have worked 24 hours a day if he had to. He was a real workaholic. But I know that nowadays people really need to balance that, and I do try to encourage that with my children.
And you know, it is one of the most common challenges that I see in the people I coach, especially you know, people who are I'm just going to say, if they're very committed to the work that they do, they again are feeling that that's showing up in overworking, and also the insecurities. You know, some people are overworking too because they're feeling the same way I felt. But it's very much around giving yourself permission to rest, to recharge, and understanding that everyone benefits when you do it. Because I will hear some people thinking that self-care is selfish. Self-care is not selfish.
Because, I know that now.
100%. But people still feel it, and they're resisting investing in it because they're thinking, I should be working right now, or I should be doing something with the family. Or what really helps is to understand that your family benefit whenever you invest in self-care, because you are, one, your health is better because you're probably taking your stress levels down, but also you're a better version. Okay, you're a better version, because how does it show up for you? And this isn't a question to you, but this isn't to the listener. How does it show up for you if you're not investing in self-care? Are you crab it with your family? Are you more frustrated? Are you less present? So if you take do a self-care activity or take time out, whatever it looks like for you, because it's important to also know, how do you refuel? What is it for you? There's no prescription. It's what works for you. Your family benefit. Now, how did the team benefit? Well, you're actually empowering them because you're starting to let go of activities. You're also showing up as your best version, you know, to them. And then the business benefits, because especially, just to know this is specific to business, but think about even the organisation that you're in, or if it is the family home, you're moving forward quicker. You know, so you're in better shape to achieve the goals that you've set. You've got more energy to do it, and more drive. That all comes from rest. There has to be a balance between action and rest. We can't be constantly doing. Now, there may be seasons and times that you do have to. So there may be certain situations, whether it's in the home or whether it's in work, that there is higher demands. That's even when it becomes more important that you're taking care of yourself during those seasons.
I interviewed Martin on the podcast some time ago, and I asked him about that work-life balance and family time. And when you're running your own business, it is very difficult to get that balance. But he says it's not so much having a balance, it's more like a seesaw, where sometimes it's all work and very little family, and sometimes it's family and very little work. But the important thing is that he does get that balance at some stage, that he spends enough time with the family, especially when you're running your own business. How do you feel about that scenario of the seesaw?
So that's the scenario where it's really important that you are protecting yourself during it. You know, so even if the season is, you know, say that there's work is demanding a lot of hours from you, you can still prioritise some sort of a recovery in there. So it just might not have the daily routine that you might have at another time, but it's making sure. So for example, if you're travelling, it's like, well, plan the day that you come home, that you have a late morning the next morning, a wee bit of time to recharge, or that you're getting date night in with your partner the next evening because you've been absent. It's being intentional about making sure that you can get it in.
It's about longevity too. You can keep going for a certain period of time, but what I've learned is that if you want long-term success, you have to build in self-care, family time. You have to build that into the process if you want to be successful in the long term. We often talk about value versus non-value, and it's a lean principle that we talk a lot about here at Seating Matters. And I was at a conference recently with a lot of healthcare professionals, and we talked about value versus non-value. And what they were saying is they spend an awful lot of their time on non-value activities, which actually adds a lot of stress for them because they're not getting the time that they need to spend on the value activities. And I know you mentioned that in your book. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, look at, look at your day, look at how you're showing up. And this is the hard part, Martina. This is holding that mirror up and actually just really looking at yourself and going, what are the habits and behaviours as well as the thinking that I need to change? Because whenever I had the situation with Kira, with my daughter, that's the first thing I did. I went, right, so what are the thoughts that aren't serving me? And then what are the behaviours that aren't serving me? So, it's look at your day and going, is that adding value or is that not adding value? And especially with the 3S of your thinking, because our thoughts create the feelings that we have that then create the action. So that's why you go back to the thinking. Yeah. So if you have someone who is, say, is really just dreading doing an activity, or I'm using the example of an activity, and they're delaying it, it'll be because they have a negative thought around it, or a limiting thought, and some non-value added thinking will be the root cause, and that's showing up in the negative behaviour. So when you start to look at how am I working, am I spending too much time on X, Y, and Z? Is that because I actually think I'm not very good at it, so I'm giving it more time? Or is it that I'm doing it to avoid doing the thing that I really need to do? And like people can sit in this for years where, they really need to know they need to do something, and they're avoiding that. And I talk about that even in the purpose chapter. It's like, do you know your purpose? And are you avoiding actually going and living it? Making the changes so that you can do it, and that might be where the inner narrative is coming in, that the person might think that they're not deserving of pursuing their purpose, or whatever change that it might require from them.
What about the fear zone? What advice would you give to people who have a fear of change, a fear of doing something different? That fear zone, what advice do you give those people?
So you can't always get away from the things that you don't like to do. So I would manage it. So if there are activities that don't naturally fall to your strengths, I would do those at the time of the day where you have the most energy, because they're going to take up the most energy from you. The first thing I would be saying is, if these are activities that you could get someone else to do, get someone else to do them, okay? Because if they're not pulling your strengths, but if you have to do them, and there will be things that we don't like to do that we have to do, then try and do them whenever your energy's high, because it's going to take more energy to do them. One of the things, Martina, that I'm really keen to hear from you today, just I think the listeners would really get from it, is when we talk about self-care. I imagine with OTs that one of the reasons they may resist some self-care is, one, they're on purpose, so they're given. They love helping people. And I wonder how they then protect themselves from all of that pain that you might see, to switch off at the end of the day. I think that's why self-care is very, very important, particularly in a people-serving role. Because you're going to naturally, if you're an empath, you'll get drained. You'll be taking that on board.
I think that's just something that you learn from experience. I know as a very young OT, I found it very difficult. I remember my very first patient that was terminally ill, and I couldn't get him out of my head day or night, how young he was, the pain he was in, leaving his family behind. But with experience, I've learned, that I have to step back a little bit, because I have to protect myself. And also, you get challenged by people thinking, oh, you don't understand, you don't care. But because we're leaving one patient and going to another patient and another patient, we have to learn in some way to leave that behind. And I know it's difficult. I got no coaching around it, but it was just experience. And I know in the book I talk about, it's very important that you fill up your own jug in order to help others. So that has been a challenge, and it's something that comes with experience.
I would imagine it's one of the biggest struggles in the industry. And even for me as a coach, I struggled with it initially. You mentioned there about people saying you don't care. Caring is one of the things that I consider one of my strengths. And, I see it in the kindest people that I know, they all care. Okay. But I was afraid to pull back in case it meant that I would care less. And I didn't want to lose that bit. I didn't want to get cold. I didn't want to lose it. So it was a personal challenge that I faced when I started in coaching, because again, you're just given so much of yourself. You are hearing challenges in that, so it can take high energy. So I learned myself that, it's back to what I said earlier, but I did learn it myself. you get drained and depleted very, very quickly if you take that on board. And that is why you have to really make sure that you prioritize your own self-care in this. Because when you're in a caring profession, when you're in a caring profession, you absolutely are going to be faced with that challenge. And it's about people recognizing and identifying in themselves for them to show up the best version that they can for the patient. They will need to look after themselves.
I have learned with experience, because there were a few times during my career where I did take things much too personal and it didn't serve me well. And not only did it not serve me, but it didn't serve the patient or the client that I was going into. And there's a lady called Esther Hicks, and I listen to her quite a lot. And she says that you can only bring people to a level that you're at. So if I'm going in with a very negative, very sympathetic, very negative energy to that person, well, then I'm not really helping them. I can only help them if I can lift myself up. So if I'm going into a situation that I'm finding stressful or it's very sad, I try to boost myself up so that I'm bringing something to that relationship, that I'm not bringing them down. And I've only learned that through experience, and it's something that occupational therapy and healthcare people really have to take on board.
So I think it would be great if anybody listening is struggling with maybe that switch off, is to just try it even for 1 week. Just for 1 week, see if you can do something that is going to just help you to refuel, and then check in with yourself the following Monday and go, am I different? Am I showing up different for this patient today by doing that? Because it really can be simply a permission issue. It's recognizing that it's not selfish, it's selfless to do it.
Of all the people and all the business owners that you've helped over the years, is there one particular case that stands out that you felt you really had a very positive impact?
Look, absolutely. I mean, I like to think the impact that I have, because obviously people are paying me for a service, that there is impact there. But I think about, there's one client who, he's probably, I would safely say, one of the most nicest human beings I've ever met. It's just such a gentle personality and a really good person. And he's part of so he is a business owner, so it is context of a business owner, but there's 3 of them. And whenever I started working with him, he had felt less than, so he didn't feel that he was as equal, to his peers. And that was showing up. He still very much had an employee mindset, and he was holding himself back from allowing himself to dream, even though he had this great business, but he was still acting like as an employee in that role. But whenever I worked with him to increase his confidence, start to really see himself as the great leader that he was, because he had this also idea that a leader was in a suit, and that wasn't his natural personality. And it was about understanding, going, no, a leader is just someone who unlocks the potential of those around them, who does care for their people. And he now has leaned into that so much that the culture of the business has turned around. But he is now giving himself permission. So self-care is a big one. He's given himself permission now to pull back from the business. They've hired somebody that can run the business. So it's not, the business isn't suffering, but he's very creative. So he will do his work now at the high energy time. So he's doing better work. He's leading the business better himself. He's believing in himself. And he now is allowing himself to dream even further. So he's got some amazing goals. One of them is writing a book. He wouldn't even have thought of writing a book, and he's now started to write the book. He's literally given himself permission now to share his experience. Like we chatted before this podcast, Martina, about just how servant leadership is about helping other people, giving them a hand up. And he's going to do more of that now with the work that he's doing, and that's the greatest satisfaction, is the lives then that he's impacting.
Caroline, is coaching, to me, it's something pretty new. It's something maybe over the last 10 years I've heard about, but maybe it's been around longer than that.
It has been around for quite a long time, actually, but not in this country. Yeah, so it's fairly new in Northern Ireland. It's something that is such a transformational tool. One of my real joys about the book is that I'm also helping the coaching profession to be elevated. Some people do have the perception that coaching is very fluffy and you just sit in a conversation with someone. It's actually not. it's transformational when it's done right. You know, you're taking somebody from stopping being the bottleneck to their own growth, whether you're an OT, whether you're a parent, you know, who's a full-time parent, or somebody wanting to get a promotion. It doesn't matter what your situation is. Coaching is a tool that can help you to stop being the bottleneck to your own growth and achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve.
And it's so valuable because it's so important, even for people who need counselling, or they feel that it's almost like a failure that they have to go for counselling. But we really need to change that mindset because it is such an important part of growth.
The thing that the reason I love the clients I work with is because if you've put your hand up and went, I want coaching, it means you have a growth mindset. So I'm working with really positive people. I'm working with people who they're ambitious, and also, but they recognize that they can be better. So they have the lean mindset of continuous improvement. Coaching is continuous improvement. Anyone embarking on it is recognizing that they can continuously improve and be a better version. So that brings a different type of person to coaching.
And it's so valuable. Even people who are going through stressful situations or grieving, they feel that it's a failure to look for counselling, but it's actually not. It's a strength. So it's something we really need to encourage more of. Yeah, that leadership mindset. I know that after my husband died in September, we had the first family wedding. Ryan's wedding was coming up, and I knew I needed to find a way to get through that. So I went to coaching very early on, or counselling very early on. And that's something I really would like to encourage other people to do at an early stage.
It does. There's a vulnerability to it, but it's all about self-leadership. You know, whether you're doing therapy or doing coaching, you are leading yourself when you're deciding to do that. And the people around you benefit from it. You know, how many people do we know that need maybe therapy or could avail of a coach, and they're not doing either. So that's an example of where you become the block.
So, Caroline, your book, Lead Self First, is 7 inspired steps to unlock next level growth. It's a lovely book. It's very practical, very easy to read for anyone who wants to take that first step. I want to wish you every success with the book. It's been a really pleasure to read. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. The conversation was great.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, Martina. Thank you.